Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to this Module 1 online training session for Pearson Edexcel International GCSE Art and Design. Just a reminder that Module 2 will be delivered tomorrow at the same time. My name is Lindsay Stockdale-Bridson, and I'm an examiner and trainer for this qualification. Jacqueline Veet, our subject advisor for our art, design and media qualifications, will be on hand in the chat box to answer any questions you may have throughout the presentation. We will also pause between the different sections to answer questions related to the slides just seen, and there will also be time at the end of the presentation for more questions. We will be covering a lot of information today, but don't worry if you miss anything, as the presentations for both modules will be shared with you and will also be available on the website after both modules have been delivered. There will also be links to useful documents on the website in the presentation. So the aims and objectives of Module 1 today are to welcome you to Pearson, an overview of the International GCSE Art and Design qualification, understanding the qualification, how to plan the course and deliver meaningful broad-based themes in response to the assessment criteria, understanding assessment, and how to present student work for assessment by external examiners. So Module 1 is designed to help you gain an understanding of how the qualification is devised and to understand the content of the qualification. We hope that you will appreciate the significance of planning courses across all titles offered in this qualification, and that an understanding of the marking criteria will give you confidence in identifying the characteristics of each mark band. Centres are encouraged to understand the requirements for submitting student work before assessment and how to plan and deliver meaningful broad-based themes. In recognising the assessment criteria for this specification, delegates will be able to support students in their selection of work. So welcome to Pearson Edexcel, the world's leading learning company and the UK's largest awarding body. We set the standard for worldwide recognised qualifications, built on the UK education system and accepted by universities worldwide. We have a simple mission: to help make measurable impact on improving people's lives through learning. So before we focus on the qualification, I would like to welcome those delegates who are working with Pearson for the first time and teachers wanting to re-familiarise themselves with the key parts of this qualification. Here is a screenshot of the homepage for the International GCSE Art and Design qualification. The link to this page is on the top right of the slide. If you haven't already done so, it would be a really good idea to explore the many valuable resources we have available to support you and your learners on the website. There are also links to our bite-sized video playlist with many short but very helpful videos on the many aspects of the qualification that we will cover in this training session. If there is time at the end of this presentation, we will show you the homepage and how to navigate it and find these useful links and documents. The website is continually being updated, and a good way to know when new material is being added is to sign up to Jacqueline's Subject Advisor updates on the link in the box on the left side under Jacqueline's name. So if you see the photograph of lovely Jacqueline on the left-hand side of the homepage, you will see various links to useful, helpful documents and the sign up to Jacqueline's Subject Advisor updates. So moving on to the first section, this is the introduction to our International GCSE Art and Design qualification. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see again the homepage and the guidelines of the specification document, which is under specification and sample assessments under course materials. It is an essential requirement for teachers to comply with the expectations of the qualification and be familiar with this document. The link to the specification is in the slide. Introduction to our International GCSE Art and Design qualification. I will now run through an overview of the qualification. Our International GCSE in Art and Design is made up of 5 endorsed titles: Fine Art, Graphic Communication, Photography, Three-Dimensional Design, and Textile Design. Each title is comprised of 2 components, each with a 50% weighting and a total of 72 marks available for each component. Students must work in the same title for each component. For Component 1, the personal portfolio, it is the centre's responsibility to devise a theme or themes for students to work on. For Component 2, the externally set assignment, or ESA, the theme is set by Pearson and released on the website on January the 2nd each year. As part of Component 2, the externally set assignment, students will complete their supporting studies before using the 10-hour period of sustained focus to work on their personal outcome or outcomes. Component 1, Personal Portfolio. Students create a personal portfolio of work in response to a theme or themes internally set by the centre. Centres are free to devise any themes, projects or tasks appropriate to their students and resources. Themes, projects or tasks may each have a separate focus or be interconnected. Students' work must comprise supporting studies and a personal response or responses, but students must only submit one project for assessment. This is very important. The project or projects must give students the opportunity to show their ability to construct a sustained line of inquiry, which is coherent, relevant, substantiated, and logically structured. All knowledge, skills, and understanding should therefore be relevant to the student's creative journey. The work undertaken for this component should be seen as part of a substantive project rather than a series of disjointed tasks, and should evidence all the assessment objectives holistically. We don't impose a set number of projects that students produce during the course, and centres may set as many projects as they wish. But at the end of the course, in consultation with their teachers, students must select one project to submit for assessment, and this should be the project that evidences their best work. The link to the essential guide to Component 1 is in the slide. Component 2, Externally Set Assignment, also referred to as the ESA. Students will produce and present a personal response or responses for the externally set theme. And the Component 2 ESA is comprised of 2 parts. Supporting studies based on the given theme prepare students to produce their final outcome or outcomes during the 10-hour sustained focus period. The 10-hour period of sustained focus can be completed over multiple sessions under formal exam conditions, and students will use this time to create their personal response or responses in relation to their supporting studies and the given theme. Students' work should evidence all 4 assessment objectives in a holistic and integrated way, and I'll be showing you examples of this later in the presentation and in Module 2 tomorrow. The externally set assignment represents the culmination of the International GCSE course, as it allows students to draw together all the knowledge, understanding and skills they have developed throughout Component 1. The preparatory period of study can be good time to organise an enrichment activity so the students can draw or take photographs relevant to the theme. For example, a gallery visit, workshop, or visit to a local area of interest could support students' responses to the externally set theme and inspire some interesting ideas. Although students should be given access to their own supporting studies during the time sessions, they are not permitted to add to or alter them, and centres must ensure that no additional work is brought into or out of the time sessions. The link to the 2025 exam paper is in the slide. Component 2, Part 1, Supporting Studies. Students can be given the exam paper as soon as it is released on the website on the 2nd of January. The intention of the preparatory study period is to allow students to begin their response to the theme in a personal and creative way, developing, refining, and recording their ideas towards the final outcome. The preparatory study period has no set time period. It is the responsibility of the centre and teacher to determine an appropriate amount of time to allow students to complete sufficient supporting studies in order to prepare them for the 10-hour sustained focus period. At the end of the preparatory study period, students will begin their 10-hour period of sustained focus to work on their final outcome. And once the period of sustained focus begins, all work on supporting studies must stop. The supporting studies are an essential part of Component 2 submission and must be submitted for assessment alongside the final outcome or outcomes. Component 2, Part 2, the 10-hour sustained focus period. Once the supporting studies are complete, students must not have access to this work except during the timed sessions. Work must be stored securely between each session. The 10-hour period of sustained focus must be completed under supervised formal exam conditions and may take place over multiple sessions, a maximum of 4 sessions within 3 consecutive weeks. And students must use their exam sessions to produce a final outcome in response to the supporting studies and set theme. And students must work unaided during these sessions. Teachers are only permitted to assist with technical issues, such as issues with the workspace or equipment. And as soon as the 10-hour period of sustained focus is complete, students must submit their work for formal assessment and must not be able to access the submitted work. There is a link to the IGCSE Administrative Support Guide at the top of the slide where you'll find more information about this. For this qualification, both components are externally marked, meaning that no internal assessment is required. And work for all candidates must be submitted for assessment on the LWT, that is the Learner Work Transfer, by the 31st of May. All work is submitted for assessment via our online assessment platform, which is accessible via Edexcel online. For each component, students can submit either 3 A2 sheets of supporting studies and 1 A2 sheet with the final outcome or outcomes. A rolling PDF is a good way to present these sheets. Or a PowerPoint presentation containing no more than 20 slides per component. If submitting a PowerPoint presentation, digital portfolios should be in chronological order, so the sequence of development can be followed by the examiner. And centres should refer to the digital submission guidance in the Administrative Support Guide. Both these are equally suitable submission options. All submissions must also include authentication sheets signed by the teacher and the candidate for both components. We will look at this in more detail in Module 2 tomorrow. Grade and mark breakdown by assessment objectives will be available on Results Plus from Results Day, which is Thursday, August the 21st. We have a new bite-sized video about Component 2. And this video focuses on planning and delivering Component 2 externally set assignment. It provides starting points for teachers and students, showcases visual examples of students' creative journeys, and offers guidance for the 10-hour period of sustained focus. The link to this is in the slide in the title. We have a large selection of helpful bite-sized videos to support you and your learners, and we'll be covering these in Module 2 tomorrow. Jacqueline, do you want to say any more about this video?
Just that it's a really good overview of starting points for both the teacher and the students, as well as ways to develop and lead onto their final outcome or outcomes during the period of sustained focus. Also, I'm making a photography specific component to video at the moment to just say for those students that are doing photography, ideas of what they can do during the 10-hour period of sustained focus.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So we have finished the first part of this presentation. So are there any questions anyone wants to ask? And if you want to raise your hand, and then Jacqueline, will you be able to manage this? And you can unmute, or you can ask questions in the chat box as well, and we'll try to opening the chat box now. And see if there's anything related to what we've just been looking at. We've been throughout the presentation pausing for questions on each section rather than waiting right to the end when we have to maybe sort of moved on quite a bit, and some of these questions may be answered today and tomorrow in module 2. But we're very happy to pause now and answer any questions.
I had one come through in the chat, but not like to the whole group. It said, can I submit the 20-page PowerPoint as a PDF? Yes, of course. Any of the file formats that are accepted for learner work transfer can be. I've had people upload it as a PowerPoint file, .ppt, .pptx, also as a PDF file. So any way that any file format that suits learner work transfer is fine.
Yes, this is all in the digital submission guidance, in the administrative support guide, on all the different formats that you can use. If no more questions, we'll move on to the next section. Are there any more, Jacqueline?
So it says the 10-hour exam, is it going to be on 2 days? So the 10-hour period of sustained focus can be split however it suits your context, a maximum of 4 sessions over 3 consecutive weeks. So I used to run it as 2 5-hour days with their normal breaks and lunches. Other places will do it as a 2-hour session, then another day do a 4-hour session. It depends on what works for the students. And also you can have different sessions for different learners. I recommend the component to bite-sized video because that really talks about that in detail and different ways you could approach it. Another question says, can the student only use one artist in the final outcome? I'll hand that one to you, Lindsay.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. We don't stipulate how many artists you have to use for each component, but it depends on obviously the line of inquiry and whether it's necessary to look at other sources to inspire the creative journey or to add something to the development of ideas. Obviously, the candidate's own photographs and their own research. It could be films, it could be a novel that they've read. It doesn't always have to be artists. It could be other sources of information that inform the line of inquiry. But obviously, if you look at one artist, it may be limiting on the maybe the choices of techniques and processes that the candidate learns from looking at that artist's work. And it may be good to look at others, even though they may not necessarily have to do responses like pastiches to every artist. They might want to show some images of the artist that they looked at in relation to the theme, and just have images of the artist's work on the sheet or on the slide, explaining that they also looked at these sources. You could do this with a visual mind map as well, which shows the examiner that you've looked at lots of different sources to inform your creative journey. So hopefully that's answered your question.
That's brilliant. And another question that's come up is, when are the new exemplars going to be posted, please, especially graphics? So I've shortlisted those and we're meeting with the senior team tomorrow. So we're hoping by the before the end of this term, but it is a priority. It just depends on time and workload and how much it takes to get it up. But they're already shortlisted. They just need to be standardized and then packaged and uploaded.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. That's a really good question. Because it's the exemplar gallery is being updated, as Jacqueline said. So everything will be a lot clearer, and a lot of the photography would be a lot clearer, and the annotation would be a lot clearer. So yeah, that's I'm really pleased that you brought that question up. Thank you. Are there
Another
any
one
more?
says, if a student submits a PowerPoint for the first component, for the second, it needs to be presented in PowerPoint as well, or can the students mix two for each component? So you should use the same submission method and approach for both components and for all learners. So either it's going to be the 4 A2 sheets photographed, or it's going to be the 20 slides. Whatever file format the slides are in is fine, but you have to choose between the 4 A2 sheets or the 20 slides, whatever works best for your whole context. And then, sorry, another one, it says the exam paper has lots of examples of fine art for the component to ESA. However, not a lot of support has been given for graphics. So within the ESA, it'll give several different starting points, and there will be a section for each of the titles. So they try and make sure that they cover the team that creates them, that they cover a range of different approaches to art. Did you want to say anything along those lines, Lindsay?
No, I think that's answers the question. I mean, when you're looking at these images, you can use whatever title your students are doing, you could look at a range from different titles to inspire that creative journey. So if you're doing graphics, you can look at fine art. If you're doing fine art, you can look at graphic ideas and photography. So it's really across all the titles, the exam paper. So, we have photography students as looking at fine art and three-dimensional work in order to inspire ideas. It's all great sources of information.
And then I see there's another question about how to write annotations. I think that's going to be touched on a little bit
Yeah.
further. Is that right? So we'll just hold
Yeah, we're
that for
doing that.
now.
Yeah, we've got a section on that in today's presentation, but thank you for asking.
And another one around what 72 marks available would mean what. We're going to be talking more around how the qualification is assessed later on. So we'll hold on to that question for now. And then another one says, is sculpture included in fine arts? So the areas of study listed in the specification, students have to cover a minimum of one. And so with under fine art, there is 3D forms, mixed media, there's lots of different approaches. So you can make it as broad-based or as focused as you want.
Yeah, the specification has a list for each title of the different areas of studies that you could cover.
And then another question, do all students have to do the same title?
For the ESA, yes. But component one, you could give a choice to your students. It's entirely up to you. It's just important that the best project is submitted for assessment for component one, but you all have to do the same title for the externally set assignment, which
Now
is set
this,
by the exam board.
now is that Noel, is it Noelia? Do you refer to the title, the entry title, as in fine art, textile design, graphic design, or are you referring to the ESA theme? Okay, so no, they don't have to be entered for the same title. You can enter them for different titles. So you can enter students for fine art, for photography, for graphics. That's absolutely fine. And students can take more than one. They would just have to complete a separate component 1 and 2 portfolio for each title they're entered for. And each entry counts as a separate qualification, which is why we split them out. But for the exam theme, yes, they all have to follow the same broad-based theme, but obviously they'll choose their direction within that. I think
Sorry, I was
that's
thinking of the
most,
wrong title
no,
there.
no worries. We had just been talking about the exam. So I think that's most of the questions for now. If we've missed anything, we'll come back to it. I just wanted to move on with the
Yeah,
training, if that's okay, Lindsay, and then we
yeah,
can see
absolutely
what
fine.
else crops
Thank
up.
you very much, everyone. Okay, so we're now going to talk about understanding the qualification. During this session, we'll take a close look at each of the 5 endorsed titles. So students must work in the same endorsed title for both components, but students can be entered for more than one title in any examination session. Each endorsed title will be awarded a separate international GCSE qualification. So fine art, the areas of study for fine art are drawing, lens and light-based media, mixed media, printing, painting, and sculpture. So we've covered that question that we've just been asked about sculpture. Students are not limited to just one area of study. However, centres should be reminded that students are required to have adequate time to fully develop their knowledge, understanding, skills and techniques within a chosen area of study. Fine artwork will demonstrate an understanding and application of the formal elements and creative skills, including mark making. And students should use visual communication sensitively and thoughtfully to document their artistic journey and fully support their intentions. As we've just said, for further information about any of the listed areas of study will be in the specification. Graphic communication. The areas of study for graphic communication are advertising and communication, design for print, drawing and illustration, interactive design, multimedia, package design, signage and typography. Students should conduct primary and secondary investigations during their design development and explore traditional and/or new technologies. And students have the option to use digital or non-digital processes. Photography. The areas of study for photography are documentary photography, photojournalism, studio photography, location photography, experimental photography, and moving image. With the development of new lens-based technologies, students should attempt to use photographic mediums to explore and create a body of work which develops and refines both the process and the concept. Textile design. The areas of study for textile design are constructed textiles, digital textiles, dyed fabrics, printed fabrics, fashion design, soft furnishings, and stitched and/or embellished textiles. Textile design is a versatile practice that involves the creation, selection, manipulation, and application of a range of materials such as fibers, yarns, and fabrics, and processes such as weaving, knitting, stitching, and printing to create designs and products. Three-dimensional design. The areas of study for three-dimensional design are architectural design, interior design, product design, environment and landscape design, sculpture, design for theatre, film and television, jewelry, body adornment and ceramics. Three-dimensional design is concerned with the designing, prototyping, modeling or making of functional and aesthetic consumer products, interiors and architecture. And students should engage with appropriate processes, materials, and construction techniques, including maquettes, models, and working drawings to help take their initial ideas through to outcomes. Drawing is at the heart of art and design and forms a core element of the practice of artists, craftspeople, and designers. It is a requirement for international GCSE in art and design for students to submit evidence of drawing. And drawing in the context of this international GCSE is taken to mean recording the observed world using mark making in appropriate media, exploring ideas visually through the act of mark making, investigating through the exploration of drawing media to find new ways of expressing ideas, feelings, or observations, and experimenting with various tools, materials, and techniques. Drawing can form part of a student's evidence for any of the 4 assessment objectives, as relevant to the creative intentions. Therefore, drawing will be assessed through all 4 assessment objectives. It is possible to evidence drawing in all 5 titles, and more details can be found in the specification and in our new drawing guide on the website. The link to this is at the top of this slide. We also have some bite-sized videos on YouTube to explain how you can evidence drawing in photography, three-dimensional design, graphic communication, and textile design, which you may find useful. Links to the bite-sized videos on drawing in textile design, photography, graphic communication, and three-dimensional design are in the slide. So in this slide, you can see drawing with textile materials such as fabric, dye, and stitching, illustration and digital drawing to produce graphic outcomes like the book cover and the portrait, and drawing to research from observation and digital media in three-dimensional design. drawing with light using both traditional and digital processes of photography, and drawing to record observations and develop ideas in a wide range of media for fine art. I'm just going to pause on this slide so you can have a look at the images. Annotation. Written annotation is not a requirement in this qualification, but when included in support of the visual language, it can contribute towards all assessment objectives. Writing is not in any way a replacement for the practical work, and annotations made, if any, should be relevant and informed, using specialist language and not merely descriptive. This is a good example of where annotation has been used to support the visual evidence, but it isn't the focus of the submission. Where possible, visual evidence should be used to demonstrate the 4 assessment objectives, but annotation is useful when explaining an idea, process, or technique that isn't obvious to the examiner. An annotation should not be used to fill gaps, but serve as a source of information to support the visual language. In this example, the candidate explains a concept that would not be obvious to the examiner. The candidate writes, "I experimented with oil paint. The dark and cool color scheme represent misery and depression, while the contrasting light being exposed from the keyhole symbolizes hope that lies behind the shut door." Just going to pause for you to have a look at this. So, are there any questions on that section of the presentation?
I think I answered most of the questions that had come up in the chat. I answered them directly in the chat. I see there's one question about, I would like to ask about printmaking techniques. Is there a successful layout for component 1? As students many times are asking the question how to get outstanding grades for initial components.
We will be showing examples of some component 1 work and how students can present work later in the presentation. But if you're doing printmaking, it's a good idea just to show maybe if you've got several different stages, say for liner printing, and you're doing several different stages of the process, you could show the start of the process, the middle, and the end. If you're adding different colors and different, obviously you're taking away some of the images, and the image changes throughout the process. It's good to show that, but you don't have to show them. You could take photographs, and so they could be a smaller size on the sheet or on the slide, so it wouldn't take up so much space. Also, you could, for all the printmaking processes, show process and explain a little bit of annotation about how you sort of created the image, how you got the image onto the plate, or if you're doing jelly printing, explain a bit of the process. But you don't need to do lengthy explanations on the process because it should be obvious to the examiner what you did. But again, you've got the opportunity to show, and we'll be showing some examples of different options for presentation later. But you don't need to put them on full size on the sheets. You could photograph them and put them on sheets in a smaller size, because sometimes, particularly if you're presenting on A2 sheets, you find that if you're going to put a lot of printing onto the sheets, you take up quite a lot of space when you've got just 3 sheets of supporting studies. So hopefully when we look at the way that your students can present their work later, that will maybe answer some of your questions.
Thank you. And then another one said, is a student required to cover all 8 areas of study in graphics? So
No.
in all of the titles, it's a minimum of 1. So they can do as many of the areas of study as they want, but it's a minimum of 1. So you can make your curriculum as focused or as broad-based as you would like.
Yeah. And your students for graphics might all want to do different outcomes. They might want to do sort of more illustration. They might want to do digital interpretations. it's good to give them that flexibility so they can create more independent creative journeys. Okay, we'll move on to the next. So, how to plan the course and deliver meaningful, broad-based themes. Planning the course, the International GCSE Art and Design qualification is a 120 guided learning hours course of study. This is a recommendation from the exam board. You have the option of delivering the 120 guided learning hours over 1, 2, or 3 years, but we do not recommend delivering this qualification in fewer than the recommended 120 guided learning hours. Induction period. If time allows, it could be beneficial to build an induction period into your course, so students get a chance to start developing the knowledge, understanding, and skills that will underpin the rest of the course. This includes opportunities for mark making, recording observations without pressure of producing work for external assessment, so like a foundation course of skills. Enrichment opportunities. This could be cultural visits or workshops, and it can be very beneficial, inspiring, and motivational for students to visit relevant places of interest. For example, art galleries or interesting cultural locations where they could draw or photograph. And this could be used for resources to inform and inspire their projects. So, component 1 theme or themes. Teachers could refer to past exam themes, ESA themes, to provide starting points for projects or tasks, or they could devise their own. You could also get some ideas from looking at the exemplar gallery and seeing what other projects other centres have done. Mock exam. It can be hugely beneficial for students to have the opportunity to do a mock exam, not least because it gives them a chance to practice planning and producing a personal response in 10 hours under exam conditions, but following an ESA paper before they actually get their ESA paper on the 2nd of January in their final year of the course. Preparatory study period for component 2. And this can commence from the release of the paper on the 2nd of January and should conclude when the sustained 10-hour period commences. Revisiting component 1. Your students may benefit from the opportunity to revisit their component 1 work after they have completed the externally set assignment. That is up to you, your students, and the time available to do this. Selecting work for submission. Your students should be encouraged to select work carefully for submission, and you should reiterate to your students that the quality of their work is the important factor, and be prepared to guide them in deselecting work that does not contribute anything to their assessment evidence as a whole. Work submitted should show convincing evidence of all 4 assessment objectives, evidence of working in the appropriate area or areas of study, and evidence of a coherent journey with a sustained focus. Planning lessons. Having a structured lesson needs to take account of all the assessment objectives, and it may not be appropriate to have all students following an identical timeline. The course needs to have sufficient flexibility to tailor the course to their specific needs. And for suggested approaches, please refer to the scheme of work available on our website using the link in the slide. Okay, we're now going to look at understanding assessment. Understanding the assessment objectives. It is important that students understand each of the assessment objectives outlined in the specification and on the assessment grid. The assessment objectives help to direct students towards a pathway of development in their chosen area of study. The link to the assessment grid is in the slide, and it's also available in the resources section in this presentation and on the website. Assessment objectives. As you can see, each assessment objective is equally weighted with 25%. This is the same for both components. Assessment objective 1 is developing ideas through investigations demonstrating critical understanding of sources. Assessment objective 2 is refining work by exploring ideas, selecting and experimenting with appropriate media, materials, techniques, and processes. Assessment Objective 3, recording ideas, observations, and insights relevant to intentions as work progresses. And Assessment Objective 4, presenting a personal and meaningful response that realizes intentions and demonstrates an understanding of visual language. The taxonomy. Using the taxonomy. When assessing work for each component, examiners will make a holistic judgment using the descriptors in the taxonomy to establish which mark band matches most closely the visual characteristics of the candidate's work. Candidates' work that falls between two mark bands must achieve all the keyword descriptors in the lower band and some in the band above. Where this happens, examiners will use their professional judgment to decide which mark band is most appropriate using a best fit approach. For example, a candidate may achieve a mark of 38, falling between performance band 3 and 4 as the work meets the criteria for all the descriptors in mark band 3 and skillful in mark band 4. After a mark band has been established, the next stage is to use the assessment grid to decide a mark within that mark band. Please note the link to the taxonomy is in the slide. Examiners will use this assessment grid to assess all student work for both components and all titles. The 4 assessment objectives are in the first column, with performance descriptors running across the top of the grid. The levels of performance head the 6 remaining columns, and the 6 bands each contain 3 marks. There is a maximum of 18 marks available for each assessment objective. So mark band 1, limited ability. Insufficient knowledge, understanding and skills, minimal evidence, and a lack of structure in the development and recording of ideas. Mark band 2, basic ability. Some knowledge, understanding and skills demonstrated, but they are simplistic and deliberate. Some structure and repetition in the development and recording of ideas. Mark band 3, emerging competent ability. Knowledge, understanding and skills are generally adequate but safe. Mark band 4, competent and consistent ability. Knowledge, understanding and skills are secure and cohesive throughout. Mark band 5, confident and assured ability. Knowledge, understanding and skills are effective and focused throughout. And mark band 6, exceptional ability. Knowledge, understanding and skills are in-depth, perceptive and accomplished throughout. Examiners mark each component separately and decide whether the evidence just meets, mostly meets, or fully meets the descriptors in the mark band to determine the appropriate mark within that band. And if you look at the assessment grid, within each mark band, you can see the words just, mostly, and fully, and the marks that represent those different levels. Examiners will also refer to the published standard exemplars to compare how the candidate's visual evidence and marks compare to the standard. And centres might find the visual exemplars available on a website helpful in planning your course and making assessment objective decisions to feed back to students. You may also find the taxonomy and assessment grid helpful when you're doing your formative assessments and marking throughout the course. So we have a new exemplar gallery, which is very helpful as you can select a specific mark band to see a range of marks and titles. And Jacqueline was just explaining to you that that is currently being updated. This slide shows you where you can find our exemplar gallery, which has been created to make accessing our standard exemplar materials more effective and straightforward. They're organized in a gallery view by performance band and component to assist you with internal assessment. I'll be showing examples of student work with marks for each assessment objective in Module 2 tomorrow. So if you look at this slide with the screenshot of the homepage, you can see on the top navigation bar, Exemplar Gallery. You click on that and then you get the drop down of Exemplar Gallery with all the different performance bands. And you click on that, you will then get an option of looking at Component 1 or Component 2 exemplars. So as I've just explained, this is what you do to find the right performance level. You can see I've clicked on performance band 4 on the right-hand side, where you can see that it's in black. And when I click on the component 1, you can see on the left, this is a selection of images, which are thumbnail images, just to give you an example of the visual characteristics of that work as an aid memoir. Portfolios demonstrate the visual characteristics typical of work in Performance Band 4 with a separate section for each component and a selection of titles. And please note the exemplar gallery, even though it's been updated, some of these images I'm showing now may not be there when you look because we've updated it. Please note this qualification is 100% externally assessed and there's no requirement for internal assessment. But this is very useful for, as I've just said, for formative assessment, and important that the assessment objectives are assessed equally in an integrated and holistic way using these exemplars alongside the assessment grid and taxonomy. So this will be useful reference for your centre when you're doing your internal assessments. And you could also show these images to your students as well as examples of performance bands they may be working at a certain stage of the course. So are there any questions on that section?
So I've answered the ones that have cropped up while you were talking. I wanted to just say one thing about the exemplars. If they're no longer included, so I know on that screenshot, some of them won't be included. The reason is because there's quite a few of the older submissions before we went digital submission in during the pandemic. And the photographs are really low quality photographs, which means that you can't actually see the detail of the artwork very well. Or the writing. Now, bear in mind, at that time, they would have been assessed via post, and so therefore the examiner was viewing the artwork in person, so they weren't relying on the photographs to assess. So we're going to be taking those ones out because they're not really helpful now that we're digital submission. We're going to be replacing them with clear resolution, ones where you can actually read what was written, see the detail of the artwork, just like the examiner will need to whenever they're assessing the work. And then I see, does graphics final outcome require work to be done on a digital software, or can it be mixed media too?
That could be mixed media. It's your choice. It's the centre's choice, and you can advise your candidates appropriately, depending on obviously their ability and also the resources you have available.
And sometimes when I taught graphics, I had different students do different things. Some were really purely digital and only wanted to do their graphics digital, whereas others were much more hands-on and wanting to do more manual techniques like printmaking and mixed media and collage. So they're all equally acceptable.
Yeah, and in the example I showed you for the drawing section, there's a book cover there that was all illustration, hand illustration. There's no digital processes used at all.
And yes, you can take digital images along with hand-drawn images. So it can be
you can
purely
combine
one or the other, or it can be combined. Absolutely. That's all the questions that have cropped up for now.
Yeah, they're really great questions. Thank you for asking those. So it's really helpful for other delegates as well to hear the answers. Okay, how to present student work for assessment by external examiners. I'm now going to show you some different ways candidates have presented their work on A2 sheets or slides using samples of work for all 5 titles. I'm only showing you as part of the candidate submission. I'm only showing you, a part of the candidate submission, as this section is all about how to present the work for assessment by external examiners. You will notice varying amounts of annotation in these examples. Writing is not in any way a replacement for the practical work, and the annotations made, if any, should be relevant and informed using specialist language and not merely descriptive or biographical, which we covered a little earlier in the presentation. This is a component 2 fine art submission for the 2024 ESA title Protect and was presented as a rolling PDF on 4 sheets. This candidate explored the concept of conflict and military protection, evidencing assessment objectives 1, develop ideas through investigations, 2, refine work through selecting and experimenting with media, and 3, recording ideas relevant to intentions, and is a good example of how assessment objectives can be integrated. The candidate did this by combining responses to visual research through primary and secondary sources and experimenting with drawing and painting media. The artist's references and their own photographs are comparatively small in size in comparison with their own responses and transcriptions. Pastiches or transcriptions are relevant when demonstrating a technique or process that informs part of the investigation. And in this case, it has clearly informed the candidate's understanding of how to create flesh tones and use a limited palette with a wide range of tints and tones. Annotation is used to support the visual evidence, but does not dominate the space on the sheet. This candidate achieved a mark of 68, which is securely in Performance Band 6, Exceptional Ability. And if you have your taxonomy and your assessment grid handy, while we go through this presentation, you can see where these marks fall in the mark bands and also on the assessment grid. This component 2 photography submission is presented on a total of 20 slides on the theme of escape, which was the 2023 exam title. The candidate chose to present each slide with a similar format, which clearly demonstrates the candidate's selective approach in their choice of images. The development of ideas and experimenting using photographic digital media techniques and processes is clearly exemplified in the way the work is presented. It is always a good idea to show evidence of the digital process for all titles by including screenshots and contact sheets, but do this so the images are relatively small in comparison to the candidate's visual responses, as this candidate has clearly demonstrated. Annotation is purposeful and supports the visual evidence by explaining the context of the candidate's ideas in relation to the processes used to create them. The candidate achieved 41 marks, which is in Mark Band 4, competent and consistent. I'll just pause for you to have a look. This is a Component 1 graphic communication submission on the theme of music and presented on slides. In some ways, this digital slide presentation is comparable to the photography sample just seen, as the candidate presents the work in a similar format with a good balance of their own photography, typography, digital responses, annotation, contact sheets, and screenshots of digital processes. The annotation supports the visual evidence to explain their ideas and typographic and digital processes in the development of their album cover design. You don't have to have titles for each page, but it can often help the candidate select and present work in a chronological order and is helpful for the examiner to see how the creative journey evolved. This is a Component 2 three-dimensional design submission for the 2023 ESA title Escape and was presented on slides. In some ways, this digital presentation is comparable to the photography and graphic communication samples just seen, as the candidate presents the work in a similar format with titles to explain their order of work and a good balance of their own photography, design sketches, screenshots of digital design processes, and annotation. Annotations are easy to read with white text on a black background and supports the visual evidence to explain their design, construction methods, materials, and digital processes using Shaper 3D in the development of their final outcome. This candidate achieved a mark of 56, which is in Mark Band 5, confident and assured. This is a component 1 textile submission on the theme of marine life. The work is presented in a chronological order with each stage of the development clearly labelled. The annotation explains the candidate's ideas, choice of materials, and processes in relation to their theme. Although the work has been submitted on 4 sheets, the work has been digitally presented, allowing for the candidate to present several photographs and digital designs with an appropriate amount of annotation to support the evidence. For the final outcome, photographs are taken showcasing different views of the garment, which is always a good idea for textiles or three-dimensional outcomes. The last 5 slides you've been looking at are examples of how your candidates could present their work. Obviously, there's more and will be more examples to look at on the exemplar gallery soon. And just remember that these are not the full submissions of work. This is just a snapshot, just to show you how work can be presented. And apart from the set number of A2 sheets or slides submitted per component, we don't dictate how the candidates should present their work. And you will see that it's good to be selective and present the best work as clearly as you can, with all 4 assessment objectives evidenced clearly, photographs in focus, and annotation clear to read, because this is obviously going to be much more helpful for the examiner. I'm just going to go back actually to some of the at the beginning, just to pause on these images again, for you to have a look at. Obviously, you'll be able to read the annotation in your own time, because I think most of these samples, I think, will be in the exemplar gallery. Is that right, Jacqueline? These are
Yes,
relatively
that's
new.
correct. Yeah, these are relatively new, so they're going to be added in there.
Yeah, so you can take your time to read the annotation, and you can see there'll be varying amounts on the submissions you see. There's no need to do lengthy biographical annotation about the artist's life and where they studied, etc. It's more important to write about how the artist's work has inspired and informed the creative journey, and what aspects of their work, if it's technique, processes, could be genre, it could be composition, that has inspired you. So it's really helpful to look at these examples as well to get a better idea of options your candidates could have in presentation. This is a good example, I think, of how they've shown the process with screenshots, Photoshop, and they've also got contact sheets, but they haven't taken up a large amount of space on the sheet. And the sheet is the primary images are the candidate's own work, which is the important is very important to show, as opposed to lengthy annotation or loads and loads of contact sheets and loads of screenshots. We don't need that, but the evidence is clear here on this, what they've used in order to develop their ideas. Again, very similar screenshots, contact sheets, and it's mainly the candidate's work that is seen, which is what we want to see. Again, it's 20 slides per component, but if you candidate wants to just submit fewer than that, that's absolutely fine. It's just as a maximum of 20 slides. It doesn't mean that the marks are going to be any different if they submit 12 slides as opposed to 20 slides. It's the quality of the work that we're looking for. You don't need to get them to fill up the slides with lots of repetition or loads and loads and loads of annotation. It's the quality that we're looking for, not the number of slides. Again, this is very clear way to display work, and showing all the different processes and the candidate's own photography, showing how they've made and constructed these 3D shapes, and how they've actually done some hand-drawn sketches as well as digital sketches. That's a good example of how your candidates could display their work. Again, as I said, with three-dimensional work, it's very good to take photographs around the object so that the examiner can see all the different sides of the piece and not just the front, to get a really good idea of the how the garment has, or the three-dimensional structure has been made. And it's very good as well on this, on the left-hand side, the sheet, where you've got examples of the making process and photographs, candidates' own photography showing the making process, but they're not dominating the page. They're quite small. So in that question earlier about printmaking, you could actually just take some different stages if you wanted to with printmaking, but they don't need to be large. You could just photograph the images and put them on the sheet like this, and have a bit of annotation to explain the printmaking process. Whether it's etching or aquatint or jelly plate, whatever they've done, they could just explain that, maybe more in the context of how they develop their ideas using this method and this process. And you've got a combination of digital sketches and the candidate's own photography, and the annotation is minimal, but it's sufficient, it's enough to explain the candidate's ideas. Okay, so, and for further support, available from Pearson now, Jacqueline, do you want to, this is you, this is gorgeous Jacqueline there. Would you like to explain a bit about signing up for the updates and all the different things that you include in those updates, and et cetera, and networking?
Yeah, of course. So we have our teaching art and design at pearson.com email that you can always email if you have any questions. And then there is a link to book a catch up, a 15-minute catch up on Teams with me if you have any specific questions for your center. The subject advisor updates, those, so I'm just going to go to the home page. Bear with me 1 second.
Yes, this is at the beginning of the presentation, I said we could show you where to find things on our homepage, and this is a great opportunity, as Jacqueline's discussing how to find all these links and documents and how to sign up things, to go to the homepage. And Jacqueline will talk you through that because she looks after this brilliantly and knows where to find absolutely everything.
Well, sometimes. Just there we go. So you should be able to see my screen now. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So the art design, so on the main art design and media page is where everything lives. You can see my new January update has been posted for this month, which has lots of component to ESA support. So I recommend having a look at that. Then down here, you'll see you can sign up to get those updates straight to your inbox by clicking on sign up to subject advisor updates. The customer support portal is where you can get in touch and make a case, or you can email teachingartanddesign@pearson.com. Either way is fine. And then we've got the Teams meeting that you can book here. It's got a selection of slots for 15 minutes to just have a quick chat about anything that you want to discuss. With those, they have a 4-week lead time. So if there's something if it's not showing, just check back later on and more dates will come available. I shorten the lead time because if people were booking 2 months in advance, sometimes they forgot about them. So it just, sometimes they're really popular and it's hard to get a slot. Sometimes there's loads of slots. So I never really know when. So just check back if one's not available. And then we've got our new Pearson Edexcel Art and Design Facebook group, and that's for GCSE, international GCSE, and A-level teachers, both in the UK and international. So that looks like this. On here, I will post different updates and new resources. You can see, so there I've posted the component 2 paper and where to find them. You can also see other teachers are posting and sharing their resources. So if somebody is doing GCSE, not international GCSE, there's some Pinterest boards they've posted on there. When the A-level one comes out, people might put on there. If you've got any international GCSE resources you want to share with people, go ahead and put them on there. It's a closed group, so it's just for art and design teachers of our qualification. It's not going to go out there public. I don't use Facebook at all, except for this group, because otherwise I don't like Facebook. So this is a really great group to join as well. And then from here, if you go to International GCSE, Art and Design, you'll be able to find all of our course materials that live here, teaching and learning, where you're going to find most of the materials that were discussed today. There's a few that are a little bit outdated that I'm currently updating and I'm going to send to the team to upload just because they're a bit old and they have older advice and actually don't include digital submission or just need a little bit revamping. So those are going live, but the links will still work. And then for the bite-sized videos, if I go back to that main page, art, design, and media, at the bottom, you can see the support videos are all linked there. We've got our art and design training playlist, which is where this recording and tomorrow's recording will go in the next few weeks, as well as be sent to people who have joined today. So, and you can see last year's down here as well. Module 1, Module 2, as well as the exam insights that we ran in December. So if you wanted to have a watch of those are all in there, as well as other teaching and learning based ones. So we did a component 2 training, mindful photography, diversifying the curriculum, supporting SEND students, curriculum planning, the use of AI, textile design, creativity. So there we do teaching and learning network events that are for all of our art and design qualifications. So you can always watch those and you can sign up for future ones as well. And then we've got our international GCSE playlist here, which has a good overview of all the different assessment objectives, which Lindsay's going to be going into more depth tomorrow with, and well as the drawing in videos I mentioned in the chat. So different ways you can draw within art and design, or within 3D design, graphics, photography. And I recommend looking at all of those drawing videos, not just the titles you deliver, because you can get ideas from other titles as well. So that's a really helpful list. If you are in a country that does not have access to YouTube, so our China centers, the regional rep, Wendy is her name, and Grace is the other one. I've sent these videos to them and they were sharing them with centers in a different format. So just get in touch with the regional reps in China if you're unable to access the YouTube videos. I think that was all of the things on that list. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And a great job.
I'll go back to the questions now. One says, what are the dates for the visiting moderators?
We haven't been given our allocation yet.
Well, for
So the
this qualification,
yeah.
there would be no moderation.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sorry.
We're
Scrap
getting our
that.
wires crossed. Yeah.
So basically you have to submit all your students' work by the 31st of May on the learner work transfer, and then it is assessed by examiners. And you have to, we'll be talking more tomorrow about how you're submitting work, but just make sure that, again, the images are very clear. It's also quite helpful to put the authentication sheet at the start of the presentation, so that, we can check that it's been signed by both the teacher and the learner, and we've obviously checked the candidate names. So you don't need to put the candidates, you don't need to label the work, each sheet, because we have that on the authentication sheet at the beginning, and also we have that on the system when the work is submitted. But we were talking a bit more about that tomorrow. But once the work is submitted on the 31st of May, then examiners can start marking the candidate's work straight away, and the same examiner will mark both components for your students. Okay, hopefully that's answered the question.
I should really stress here that for this qualification, it is 100% externally assessed. So there is no requirement for internal assessment at all. However, we do recognize that centers often want to give formative feedback and assessment either to students, to parents, to senior managers, which is why we provide the assessment grid and the taxonomy. But those tools are used by the examiners, and you don't have any assessment paperwork to upload whenever you submit the work. You just submit the portfolios and the authentication form, and then that's it. The rest is done.
Yeah, it's useful you can use the descriptors on the taxonomy to go through that with your students and then maybe talk about sort of a mark band that they're working at that point in time and show them images in the exemplar gallery and say that this is the visual characteristics that matches the work and the level you are now. And if you want to improve, then this is what your work would look like if you moved up to the next mark band. So for formative assessments, they're really useful tools for you to use in your, as Jacqueline said, in your formative assessments. And also some of the wording is quite useful when you're writing reports as well, if it lines up with the wording on the assessment grid and the taxonomy that you're using in your teaching.
Absolutely. We have another question about how to access this presentation. So if you go to the More tab on Zoom and then Resources, it is available to download right now under Documents. Oh, it's just the assessment grid and
I think,
taxonomy.
yeah, I think we're waiting until after module 2 tomorrow, and then they're going to be shared
Thank
then,
you.
because it's 2 parts webinar. But yes, normally, Jacqueline's right, normally we have it available straight away, but because it's a 2-part webinar, that's why we're going to have it. But you'll have access to this, and it will also be on the website in a couple of weeks, usually 2 weeks or so after the webinars are finished. It's accessible for everyone. And like Jacqueline's just showed you, last year's are available to watch. Obviously, this is updated images, so it's better for you to watch my updated one. I hope most of you will be able to attend tomorrow's session, because we're going to look a lot more visual. I know that we're very visual people, so you'll be looking not as many words tomorrow, a lot more visual work tomorrow, which will be much more fun.
Absolutely. And where the slides will be added, just to show you, I'm back on the International GCSE Art and Design course materials page. And under teaching and learning, you'll see there's past training content. So the slides from all our past events are all on here. And that's where these slides will also get added if for some reason you don't download them tomorrow or get sent them.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Could you show them where the schemes of work are as well?
Yes, of course.
On here.
So also under teaching and learning materials. So if I go to the main International GCSE page, if you click up here, that's where your exemplar gallery lives. And if you click here, that's the course materials. And then you just have to navigate to teaching and learning materials. And then you'll have your assessment grid and taxonomy. You'll have, oops, sorry. You'll have extra time and SEND FAQs, artist directory where students can search for different artists based on their type, their themes, their media that they use, a book list, recommendations, diversifying the curriculum guide to help make them more representative. You've got the past training content, and then there's schemes of work there. So these can be helpful if you're just starting your course or just want to have a look at how to structure the course. It gives you really good guidance there. It's not prescriptive, but it is there to kind of support and give you a bit of guidance if you need. We also then have the support guides, which is a contextual references guide where students can get a list of reliable websites to search for artists, contextual references, etc. We have our drawing guide. I'm just updating the getting started guide and the essential guide to component 1, but those are really helpful too. They just need to be updated. And we've got then some tutorials on different software that students could use if they wanted. I guess I should go to under forms and administration then. You've got your administrative support guide that has all the digital submission guidance, all the key dates, and then you've got an AI guide, so how to use artificial intelligence in international GCSE. And then your authentication form is underneath form. You won't really need the labels unless you're going to be doing sheets and you wanted to include them. The labels had mostly been used when we were doing postal submission, but it's all digital now.
Because I understand,
And,
sorry to interrupt, Jacqueline, I understand that
mhm.
when they submit work on the LWT, they have to actually put the candidate number in, the candidate name, anyway, so that when the examiner opens the folder, the examiner will see the candidate number and the candidate name, because that's how you put that in when you upload the work into the LWTA. Because I saw a question pop up about that. So
yeah, that's correct. So you'll have your list of learners, and each learner already has all its details from Edexcel Online on there. So you're literally attaching the file to each learner. So you're attaching the file to
yeah,
all of their center numbers, center candidate details. So you can also name the files in any way that makes sense to you. There's no naming conventions you have to follow, because once they're uploaded, they're attached to all those important details already.
yeah, yeah.
And then under exam materials is where you're going to find the paper that was released for this year, as well as past papers. And I highly recommend reading the examiner report for past papers. I don't know why they've put it twice. There is only
No.
one examiner
Yeah,
report. That's a bit silly.
yeah. We're covering that tomorrow as well, with
Yeah,
some points about why. And it's important to read that, because these reports are from the chief examiner writes. There's based on the feedback from examiners on how they found the series and how centres responded to the theme, the exam theme, and what they did for their Component 1 projects, how they addressed the assessment objectives, and key points that were raised for that series. It's very useful for you to read as centres, because then you see what the examiners felt was really positive and what the examiners felt wasn't so good. So we'll talk about that tomorrow in more detail.
absolutely. And I also see another question around can we have face-to-face in Egypt? So there's no plan at the moment. The training team will be organizing any events that are happening over the next year. So I'll feed that back to them. But in the meantime, if you're interested in requesting center-based training, I'll show you where that, go back to my page. I'll show you where that
You're
lives.
so good at sharing all these different documents.
So if you open if you just search Pearson center-based training, it'll come up. I go to it so often, it'll usually just
Yes,
open straight away. And on there, you can request, they'll have different fees for online sessions, and then face-to-face depends on the region, the length, the place. So you can put in those requests. And if you've got more than one center in the region that wants to request the center-based training, then you guys can join up and split the costs as well. And under international GCSE, art and design will have the available modules, which are going to be similar to these ones. But if those aren't appropriate to your needs, then you can always request on this form, request a center-based request form if there's something more specific or tailored. So for example, we had a center for A-level that wanted to extend their higher attainer photography students. So we delivered a bespoke training for that. So any center-based training requests just come through on this center-based training page.
great, thank you.
I think that was all the questions. Did I miss anything?
I'm just looking through.
I did miss, it would be useful to explain why they lost the marks. Apologies. That was back when you were going through the exemplars. I missed that one. Is it Ayana? Which exemplar would be helpful to talk through for the marks?
We're going to go through some of that tomorrow, how
Okay.
the marks were. We're going to go through each of the assessment objectives for whole submissions. So you can actually see how they got the marks and why they got the marks, with an explanation as well. So we'll have an example of that, showing a whole photography sample tomorrow, and a fine art and graphics too. So on sheets, on slides. So hopefully, I'm hoping you can all attend tomorrow's session, because that will have a lot more. If you can't attend tomorrow, you will obviously be able to access this in a couple of weeks on as Jacqueline's told you where to find it. It will be available for you to look if you miss it. It's also really good to be able to, if you've got several teachers in your department, to maybe share this with them, and they can, or show them where to find this on the website so they can actually look at it as well, because I know that you're not always available to attend these 2-hour sessions, and so it's a really good thing to do, to share with your departments. Just looking at questions. You'll know the mark in relation to mark breakdown. If you sign up for Results Plus, after results come out, you will get a mark breakdown for all your students. Is that right, Jacqueline? And
Yes,
Results
that's
Plus.
correct. And I guess
Uh,
that's a really important thing to cover here now too, because it's 100% externally assessed, there is no moderation. And therefore no moderation report. And I think there's a bit of confusion around results day often, where centres are expecting a report. So the purpose of moderation is only to comment on the accuracy of internal centre assessment. It doesn't give any other feedback beyond that, and the parameters are really tight from regulations on what moderators are allowed to say. So because there's no internal centre assessment for this qualification, there would be nothing for the moderators to comment on. So that's why there's no report at the end. Instead, what centers receive is a breakdown by assessment objective, um, on Results Plus, and then you're able to cross-reference that with the taxonomy and the assessment grid to see which performance band the examiners place the students and the descriptors for that band, and then align that to the exemplar gallery to see examples of what student artwork at that level looks like to help interpret the AO mark breakdown. So that causes a bit of confusion every results day. So the reason there's no report is because there is no internal assessment to comment on.
Thank you, Jacqueline. It's just downloading the 2025 paper. Jacqueline, I just showed you where to access that. And you need to have obviously log in with your Edexcel online login. Is that correct, Jacqueline? Yeah.
That is correct. And we're not allowed to email them, unfortunately, because of regulations. I know the paper's out there, but because of regulations, we can't email them.
Let's have a look at.
I can say that the theme this year is intertwine. So just make sure that's the theme for the international GCSE that your students are following. Because last year, a few centres responded to the GCSE, which is the UK qualification theme, not the international GCSE theme. So the GCSE theme is gathering and the international GCSE is intertwined. So just make sure you're using the right paper if you're entering students this year.
And that was a comment that was made by the chief examiner in the chief examiner's report as well, that some centres, even though the examiner didn't penalise them, they just went ahead and marked it with the GCSE title. It is really important to make sure you don't get the two modelled up, because you know, asking about like visiting, moderation, etc. This is, as we said earlier, this is a purely externally assessed qualification, and GCSE, you can have a moderator visit to mark the work, to moderate the work, but it's very different. The weighting as well for GCSE for the marks is different to international GCSE. So there are differences in the qualification. So just make sure that you look at the right qualification and the administrative support guide for each qualification too, for digital submission. Okay, thank you, Jacqueline. Right, we'll be showing examples tomorrow of student work. So hopefully some of these questions about experimentation, technical skills, development to ideas will be explained a little bit more clearly tomorrow. So hopefully you'll be able to attend that or look at the recording. Is there anyone else that is unsure where to find anything on the homepage while Jacqueline has this, is sharing her screen? Any questions related to how to find documents? I'll be going through with screenshots about how to find key documents, etc. tomorrow at the end of the presentation as well. But as if there's anything you need to know right now, Jacqueline could show you while she's got the screen share. Okay, if we go back to my presentation now, Jacqueline, if that's okay.
Yep.
I don't think I've got very much left apart from just to explain module 2. Okay. Let me just get back to mine. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah. Can I just answer one question really quick
Oh,
before you go? Just because it would be easier than typing. Someone's
absolutely.
asked, would you suggest international students take the GCSE syllabus? So in terms of GCSE versus international GCSE, they're both recognized to the same level, and they're both really good qualifications. It really comes down to what your center preference is. So for GCSE, centers have to assess both components themselves. So you'd have that would be an additional workload, but some centers prefer to have that responsibility to assess the work and then just have a sample checked by our moderators. Also, the weighting is 60% for component 1, 40% for component 2. And students have a much larger submission size because it's internally assessed by the teachers. So they have a maximum of 80 slides per component. But that's because the teacher is going to assess all of the work as if they were the examiner and only submit the marks. And then the moderator will view a sample of the work to check that the marking is either accurate, or if it's inaccurate, they will change the marks. And then you find out on results day what those are. And the center moderator report will then explain why the marking was accurate or inaccurate. For international GCSE, that is 100% externally assessed. It's exactly the same assessment objectives and exactly the same standard for in terms of what the marks equal to. But you don't have that additional workload of having the internal assessment. And then examiner will mark all of the work for both portfolios. So that's why it's a smaller submission size, which is a maximum of 20 slides or the 4 A2 sheets per component, and via digital submission. For GCSE, it would be digital submission for moderation as well. But centers can choose to have a visiting moderator at an additional cost, and that cost just depends on the region, how many centers are in the area, and we have a communication that goes out that goes through the costs. So that would be one option. With the international GCSE, it's only digital moderation, but it's nice and easy to use, and it's quick to upload everything. So those are kind of the main differences. So it just depends on whether your center prefers to do the internal assessment themselves or have it externally assessed. Really comes down to those preferences.
And you can also book just a center-based online training as well, which we've done for a few centers, which is more specific to your actual needs as a center. So that can be arranged. Is that through the same booking system
Yes,
that you showed?
that's the center-based training, yeah.
Yeah, which we've done already this year. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. So we've answered quite a few questions, and we will have a bit more time left. But just want to thank everybody for attending today, and hope you found this first module helpful, and that hopefully you'll be able to attend tomorrow. Tomorrow, module 2, will be helping you to understand the assessment objectives for this qualification. We'll be exploring the idea of a broad-based theme and explaining more about the marking criteria and how to improve performance for your learners, how to find and use key administration documents, which we've actually covered today, thanks to Jacqueline going to the homepage and going and showing you where everything is. And we'll also identifying the support available for Pearson, which we'd also briefly covered today. As I said earlier, we'll be seeing a lot more visual examples tomorrow. And hopefully some of the questions that your questions were fantastic today. Thank you so much for asking them. We'll be touching on some of those points that you made in your questions today in the module tomorrow. Meanwhile, if you are attending tomorrow and you have thought of questions based on today's presentation that you wanted to ask, by all means ask tomorrow. We've got a little bit of time left today for questions. If anyone wants to stay in this webinar to ask questions, and we will be able to, I think, if you put your hands up, you'll be able to unmute if you prefer to ask the questions that way. But obviously we can continue to answer questions in the chat too. But again, really appreciate you attending this session, and hopefully you found it helpful. Jacqueline, is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, that was it.
I'm
Just really thank you for being here. And I love working with all the teachers. Sorry, go ahead.
So I think we've answered most of the questions I'm looking at now. Yeah, we've answered those. Just having a click through. Yeah, I don't think this. Oh, hang on, that's that. Evaluation forms. We don't provide evaluation forms. I think I'm not sure if you mean the. Do you mean the authentication form?
I think they're referring to on the slide. It says, please remember to fill in your evaluation forms. Those are going to be emailed to you.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Jacqueline. Yes. Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry for me getting confused there. Yeah, so you'll get an email to ask what you found useful. This is really helpful for us moving forward. So we can improve. We're always looking at ways to improve what we do. So that would be really helpful if you have the time to do that. Each AO has to be done on separate sheets. No, it doesn't have to be done on separate sheets at all. You can combine it. And as I've explained, it's really good for this qualification as well that all the sort of assessment objectives are integrated. And so you don't have to label a sheet assessment objective 1, assessment objective 2, etc. I think the example I showed you in some of the presentation samples earlier showed how the assessment objectives were integrated. And I think in all of those that I showed you, there was assessment objectives 1, 2, and 3 integrated into those 2 slides or 2 sheets that I showed you. We'll be talking a little bit more about the evidence and how you can actually show that evidence. But this qualification is designed so that the AOs are seamlessly integrated. As you're looking and where you start your project, it could be started with observational studies. It doesn't have to be started with artist research. Often going on a visit and doing sketching and photographs can start informing ideas for a project. So we don't specify a particular order. No, that's hopefully answered your question. But again, tomorrow's module should make this a lot more clearer for you. So hopefully that's answered your question. Do we attach the authenticate sheets to the PowerPoint? There's an option to submit them in the administration section on the LWT, the authentication sheets. But in addition, some centres submit the authentication sheet at the start of the presentation, at start of the PDF presentation or the PowerPoint, which is actually quite helpful for examiners. We don't specify that you have to do that, but it is quite helpful so that the examiner, before they start marking the work, can check that the teacher and the learner has signed it to say that it was their own work. And that's good. Often if centres don't upload the authentication sheet or attach the authentication sheet to a presentation and it's missing, it delays the marking process because the examiners then have to contact the centre and ask the centre to upload these sheets after they've finished uploading all the work, which can cause a bit of a delay in sort of chasing these up. So it's really important to remember that these documents have to be submitted. So we don't want any assessment grids because it's all externally marked by examiners. So you don't need to upload any assessment sheets that you've done throughout the course. Absolutely not. We don't need to see that because examiners are going to be marking it, not moderating it. That's the main difference between the two qualifications that we were talking about, the differences earlier. If the student feels they've finished before 10 hours is up, they don't have to stretch themselves out to the full 10 hours. If they finish before the 10 hours, that's fine. If they've done the best work that they can, that's absolutely fine.
I used to get students that did that as well. And what I tried to do in the mock exams is really push them to understand what they're able to achieve during
Yeah.
a sustained period of focus, so that by the time they got to the 10 hours, they had a better understanding, because it goes a lot quicker than they expect. And then if a student said they were finished, I just would say to the, I wouldn't say it in the exam, but I always prepared them beforehand. Like, if you think you're finished, look and see what else you can do. Is there anything else you can refine? Make something to go along with it. Think about being flexible and really making sure that before the exam they're ready for that, because they want to try and use the full 10 hours. But if they say they're done, then there's not much you can do, is there? Because it's independent. And I also see whether or not you bring the prepper material in the component two is on there. Absolutely, yeah, they bring all of their prep material there because it's there for them to use and work on and during that, so that they can inform what they're making during that 10 hours. And if it's digital, then yes, they can be working on their devices purely for that. Now, it needs to be a school device, and you need to make sure that anything that is on there is only related to the student's component two. No other students can be accessed on the digital device. And then at the end, between the sessions, the device must be kept secure, just like you would with the physical artwork. And then at the end, everything needs to be removed from that device regarding component two, and then stored somewhere digitally securely, just like you would do the physical work.
Students allowed to listen to music. No, the exam at the 10-hour period of sustained focus has to be conducted under formal exam conditions. So no music. Used to
Correct.
be
Now,
allowed to, but that's changed now, hasn't it,
yeah.
Jacqueline?
I remember the days when we had that. It was lovely. But unfortunately, a student used, I think it was GCSE, a student in the UK used their iPod to connect to a network or something like that and asked their dad for advice. So that
Yeah.
started the ban on music.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is an exception newly published this year in the regulations around rare circumstances where students have sensory needs. So please do check out that SEND an extra time FAQs that I showed earlier, and that's on the course materials page under teaching and learning FAQs, because that talks about how you can apply for that access arrangement for students who either need white noise or music playlists because of their sensory needs.
Yeah.
But that's not
Student
blanket for everyone.
Yeah. Student can't find suitable reference images. Can they generate AI images? Well, we've actually got a whole. Do you want to talk about the new AI policy? We're actually going. I'm
Yes.
covering a bit of this in module 2 tomorrow with examples of AI and how it can be used as part of the creative journey, but not obviously just using AI images and submitting as their own work. And they should annotate that it's actually AI and it's useful sometimes as you said, to generate an idea, but the candidate that must move forward with their own personal response to that. But Jacqueline, do you want to explain more about the policy on the Pearson policy for this?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we've published AI guidance, and we had a really great AI training session earlier in the school year. So I think it was November or September, that I highly recommend watching. And it shows the ways that you can use AI, because AI is just another tool, and it's how they use that tool. Now, what they cannot do is, like Lindsay said, pass the work off as their own. So anything that they create in AI must be clearly referenced, and then they need to develop their own ideas from that. They can't just use that and then that's it. Otherwise, it won't get really any marks, because there was no development or refinement or recording. But AI is okay as long as it's referenced, as long as the students are developing their own ideas from it, and it's not passed off as their own.
Yeah, and as I said, there'll be a slide on this tomorrow with some examples of how students have used AI. Are students allowed to use laptops and iPads? They're not allowed to access the internet, but they can use their laptops and iPads if they're doing any digital processes as part of the 10-hour exam.
Absolutely, and any digital devices can be used in the exam as long as, like you said, they aren't have access to the internet. Obviously, no mobile phones whatsoever, or anything else with mobile data can be used. But anything that just is a internet based and has no access to internet, absolutely fine. You just need to keep it secure between sessions, and then remove everything from the device at the end of the sessions. I see there's a question here. Could you please explain how GCI assessing happens? Do you mean graphics, GC?
Nalushkia, do you want to unmute? Now you've got access to the raising your hand and unmuting, which may find much easier for you. It's nice to hear your voices too.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, we
Hello.
can hear you.
Just want to clarify this is not the IGC, the GCI option. If we choose that, you mentioned we have to assess internally. Could you please explain a little more? Like, should it do by the school teacher or a center teacher? Like, could you please explain a little more about that?
So for GCSE, that is a whole nother process in terms of internal assessment. What I recommend doing is looking at our GCSE bite-sized videos and attending one of the GCSE coursework marking trainings, which are also on the website where you signed up for this one. If you shoot me an email at teachingartanddesign@pearson.com, I'll send you the links to all the GCSE resources as well as the training, if that so that you can see which option you prefer for your center.
And we've got a recording of online training sessions we did for GCSE in November last year. They're available as well on the website, and Jacqueline can send you those links.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. Any other questions from anyone?
Had some great questions today. So again, if you think of anything that you need to ask, then you could either email Jacqueline on teaching art and design at pearson.com, or Jacqueline or one of her team will reply, or join us in tomorrow's session, where you can ask us questions too. Okay. If there's no more questions, we could finish the session a bit earlier, 10 minutes earlier. Any more questions? No, I don't think so. Well, again, thank you so much for attending today. And I'd like to thank Ellie, our event moderator, for looking after us, and also for Jacqueline Veet, our specialist subject advisor on all our art and design qualifications at Pearson. Thank you, Jacqueline. It's been very helpful having you showing us the homepage and how to find all the documents. It was really, really helpful for delegates today. And look forward to seeing you tomorrow for Module 2. So I think we can...
Thank you, Lindsay, for being such a great trainer.
Thanks.